Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy, Damon.
Hello there. Jonathan Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
Hello there. And this week we are joined by Bo Moore, IGN's executive editor of tech, and he's going to help us break down all of the Nvidia news that came out this week. Bo, thank you so much for joining the show this week.
I'm happy to be here. Hello, Damon.
Hello. So Nvidia announced some very impressive new graphics cards this week that may be giving next-gen consoles a run for their money. First of all, Bo, break everything that Nvidia announced this week down for us.
Yeah, for sure. So the big announcements was the RTX 30 series of cards. This is the successor to the RTX 20 series, which has been out for about 2 years now. And the three cards that were announced were the RTX 3070, the RTX 3080, and the RTX 3090. I'll get to that last one in a bit. The flagship card is the 3080. That's the basically mainstream card that NVIDIA wants everyone to buy. It comes in at $699. And it has 10 gigs of GDDR6X RAM and is capable of something called 30 shader teraflops. Now, we can talk a little bit later about whether or not that's the same metrics that the consoles are using. It's sort of yes, sort of no. But it is undoubtedly very, very powerful. NVIDIA says that it is twice as powerful as the current 2080, which is also a $700 card, or at least it was when it launched. And we're looking at like a 2x performance increase, which is absolutely huge. At the top end is an absurd 3090. This is the card that basically is only for absolute enthusiasts. It is a $1,500 graphics card, and they say that it can do 8K at 60 frames per second. I will believe that when I see it. But NVIDIA brought in a couple of gamers and journalists. I believe Adam Sessler in that video, and they were apparently blown away. So, maybe it really does live up to those standards. The card that really matters for us, though, is the RTX 3070, which is a $500 card, and it is still more powerful than the current gen 2080 Ti, which is the best graphics card that you can buy right now. So If that card really is more powerful than a 2080 Ti at only $500, we're looking at a really, really impressive graphics card right there.
Okay, and so how do these cards compare to the specs we know for the next-gen consoles, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X?
So, like I said, teraflops is it's a weird metric.
Sure.
It's something that it's the best we can go on, really. It's a metric of your shader cores and the clock speed and all these different things. What NVIDIA talked about in their presentation was 30 shader teraflops we're talking about the 3080 right now. 30 shader teraflops, 58 ray tracing teraflops, and 238 tensor teraflops, which is what's used for AI calculations. That's used for things like deep learning super sampling, which is one of these techs that helps graphics cards perform even better in high, super demanding, high frame rate situations. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison. You can't just say, the PS5 has 10.2 teraflops, the Xbox Series X has 12. It's not quite, that's 10 and this is 30, so it's 3 times as powerful. But it's definitely more powerful.
Even the low end of NVIDIA's graphics cards going forward is more powerful than next-gen consoles. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, the 3070 has 20 shader teraflops. Again, it's not an apples to apples comparison because we're talking about different graphics architectures, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into these calculations. But yeah, the 2080 Ti current gen has been out for 2 years. We already by the old metrics, basically everybody says that's a 14 teraflop GPU compared to 12 and 10 on the Series X and the PS5. So if that's a 14 point something and the 3070, that was a $1,200 graphics card, by the way. This is now a $500 graphics card that is equal to, if not better than that 2-year-old 2080 Ti.
Sure. Okay. So Ryan and Jonathan, we continue to wait for price and release date for the next gen consoles, even though now it's September. And Ryan, in particular, Xbox, has said all along that they're making the most powerful console ever made with the Xbox Series X. But now we know it's not going to be as powerful as the lower level graphics card from Nvidia going forward. Is there any sense that Nvidia may be stealing next gen's thunder? Because now we know the launch, we know the price for these cards, and we know that the launch window is supposed to be sometime in this month or in next.
I don't think so. I mean, there's the beautiful part about this is that it fits into its own segment of the market. I mean, these are for hardcore enthusiast, deep walleted gamers, because this, you're talking about $500 for the low end 30 series, which is what we expect one or both of the PS5 and the Series X to cost. But that's the GPU. I actually just built a new PC 2 months ago. And yes, while I missed out on these GPUs, which is unfortunate, I ended up spending, without them, I think I had about $1,800 to just go from scratch. Because unless you have a pretty modern CPU and plenty of RAM and super fat, like I put in 2 gigs worth of NVMe hard drive in this to sort of, match up to that new hard drive spec that both new consoles are using. So it's, you got to spend a lot more to get a super beefy PC. But if you can, then yeah, you're going to get an awesome gaming experience out of that. And that's always been the case. I mean, the 360 was sort of regarded as a very powerful console in 2005. It was a year before the PS3 came out with its cell architecture, whereas the 360 was actually x86 based. And it was like, wow, this kind of holds up fairly nicely to PCs. Well, it doesn't last long. I mean, PC is always going to march forward, and these new GPUs are always going to keep coming. So you're going to get pretty good bang for your buck out of the consoles. And that's really always been the point of a modern console, is to kind of get you a pretty good, high, relatively, medium to high end PC gaming equivalent experience for a very reasonable price.
Sure. Jonathan, what's your take on this when you're comparing the PlayStation 5, what we know of the PlayStation 5, to these cutting edge graphics cards?
It's a little hard since Sony doesn't want to tell us anything about the PS5 these days. But no, speaking both to echo Bo and Ryan, the direct comparison is definitely a little tough. But I don't think the audience at large who may be thinking I'm going to go buy a PlayStation will hear about these cards and say, oh, I need to go now buy one of these cards, because of course, as everyone was saying, there's a lot more that goes into building your own PC. I'm someone who's never owned a gaming PC, doesn't have a single part ready to put in and this slot to start customizing. I'm not intending to this fall. I'm going to stick and buy a PS5, one on a cost side of it, but two, it's just not the thing I'm jumping into right now. But like Ryan was saying, for like the people who do have the money, for people who can make the investment, and obviously getting to see a little bit of what these PCs and these new cards are going to be able to show off, I can't wait to see that. I just probably personally won't be experiencing it myself. And I think for consumers like me who just kind of want that box this holiday, want to be able to jump in and kind of know what they're getting right away, consoles make sense as they have the past few generations.
Sure. And Bo, how about you? Looking at all this stuff, I know you follow all these the specs for all these machines and cards very closely. What's the most attractive option for you for cutting edge graphics this holiday season?
I mean, for me, I'm the PC guy, so I already have a 2080 Ti. I don't really, and that's still a fantastic card. I don't need to upgrade it, and so for me, I'm looking at the high end again, and thinking about, well, do I want to spend $1,500 and be able to play in 8K on an 8K TV that I don't have? Mm-hmm. Yes, I do want to do that. But, something, though, that really stuck out to me, Ryan, you were saying, like, the consoles, they've always been able to get you a pretty good experience. That's what you were just saying. But yeah, is that what people want out of next gen? Like, the whole point of these next gen consoles is to be better than pretty good. Like, you can have a pretty good experience on the current gen consoles or on, things that have been out for a long time. But for people who are really looking for, this generation was supposed to be the time when we're hitting 4K, we're hitting 60 FPS or 120 FPS. This really truly next gen experience. if that's what you're looking for, I gotta say, like, why aren't more people looking at PC? I understand there is a bigger cost, to go in there. One thing to not forget is that while they haven't been announced yet, there will undoubtedly be the it'll be the 3060 variant of the 30 series graphics card, which will be basically the mainstream version. Of course, this hasn't been announced yet, but all but guaranteed that there will be a 3060, likely around a maybe $300 price point, that I wouldn't be surprised if it also will be able to match, if not beat, the next gen consoles.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly pretty good. It's always relative, right? And there's also the notion, and I know PC gamers will bristle at this, but how are games really going to take full advantage of a $1,500 graphics card? Because most games are third-party games. Most games are built for the consoles, and believe me, I have both staring right now at my new gaming PC, and then pretty soon behind me, there'll be a couple of new next-gen consoles. So I'm playing on everything, but there is historically, I'm not sure if there's any guarantee really that you're going to be getting your 30 shader teraflops worth out of that $1,500 card. That's what I kind of want to see. I mean, we did see Cyberpunk demonstrated with some of this stuff turned on, and that's obviously going to be a big driver for a lot of people. But kind of over the course of it, there is that kind of, to me anyway. This is from a middle class guy who, like, I spent just barely more than the 3090 costs for my entire PC. There is kind of that like point where how much are you really getting in return for all of that money you're spending? Like, how are the developers going to really take advantage of this stuff?
Bo, is it true that the highest end graphics cards are sometimes held back by consoles?
I mean, I think in the past, they definitely have been held back by consoles because, this is something that we've talked about a lot with the SSD speeds and hard drive speeds. That's something where games had to be designed around that. But, if we're just talking about pure graphics performance, the PCs weren't really held back. If anything, it was just the consoles holding themselves back. And, yes, they could hit 60 FPS or 30 FPS in most cases at 1080p. And then for the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, they could do 4K at 30 FPS. But the graphics settings, you can't go in and tweak the specific graphics settings in console games. Now we're starting to see things like a performance mode versus a quality mode. And, that's something where that's the equivalent of going into your settings and are you playing on, low, medium, or high, or ultra, or whatever absurd title they want to name the higher than ultra graphics preset. And I remember a GDC talk that I went to years ago where the developer was saying that when they were designing for console versus PC, the PC low spec was what the console was running at. Granted, this was a while ago, and this isn't indicative of every single game, but it's pretty much not guaranteed, but it's pretty much understood that with PC and that headroom that the higher end graphics card allows for you, that's what lets you crank up the settings to the max with, high res texture packs, playing on higher resolutions. For PC, it was, access to 1440p and 4K before the consoles got there, by years. And so those are the things that graphics card headroom really allows you to do on PC that, we're starting to get there on the consoles, and that's what the consoles are promising. But, the PCs are just going to keep raising the bar even further. And if 8K, we're still years away from 8K being the mainstream standard resolution for everyone. But for those enthusiasts, if the 3090 can truly do 8K at 60 FPS, like, that's really, really impressive. And there's going to be people who are going to want to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's very exciting news for PC gamers this week. Before we run out of time, let's hit on a couple news bits for the next-gen consoles. We got some updates on both PS5 and Xbox Series S this week. Of course, the Xbox.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, the Xbox, the Series X and S are going to be compatible with every generation of Xbox. Now, the Sony, we know PS5 is compatible with PS4. Sony hasn't explicitly said anything about being compatible with PlayStations 1 through 3. However, this week, Ubisoft may have revealed that it is definitely not going to be compatible with those consoles. A Ubisoft support page had some text explaining that backwards compatibility for Ubisoft games will be supported for PlayStation 4 titles, but will not be possible for PS3, 2, and 1. And then that text was, after that, redacted. But Jonathan, do you take this as confirmation? I don't know how many people were expecting PS5 to be compatible with those older systems anyway, but is this sort of like confirmation to you that it's definitely not going to be?
Yeah, it's a really strange case because this wasn't in necessarily a press release for a next-gen game or a press release for Ubisoft's plans overall. It was a single support page about upgrading from PS4 to PS5. So it is just as likely that this was just someone on the support team taking the information that's out there and making an educated guess, or someone who had this information and just put it out there before they were supposed to. It could honestly be either or. Mm-hmm. But I've definitely been going into it. PS5 backward compatibility messaging has kind of been muddied from the start.
Sure.
But because of the way the PS4 was not backward compatible and PlayStation really hasn't shown much interest in going backward compatible beyond the PS4 when it comes to the PS5, I was never expecting it. And honestly, I think I would love some sort of way to access the legacy library, because I do think there's something to be said for game preservation and being able to have these old classics, both the great, the weird, the good, the bad. Being able to access these old libraries is interesting and a fun thing to go back to. But I think if we see that with PlayStation, it's going to be delivered either via the PSN, and they'll allow you to download old games on PS5 through some sort of emulation, or via PlayStation Now, their subscription service, which does exist and does have a PS2 and PS3 category to it, and will probably maybe just be expanded as an offering on PS5.
Mm-hmm. So Ryan, if this is true, if PS5 is not compatible with the older systems, is that a significant advantage Xbox has over them? Or is it more of just a marketing bullet point that's nice for them to have, something they have that the competition doesn't have? Maybe not so much that players use that often in practice.
It is important, and it's, I think, becoming more important over time as games have longer and longer tails and longer shelf lives to them. Mm-hmm. You want to go back to things, you want to keep playing things. So, I mean, if you go back to Phil Spencer took over as the head of Xbox in, I believe it was March of 2014. So he's 6.5 years on the job. The first major initiative he announced was backwards compatibility. And Microsoft's been investing in that for a long time. They have now original Xbox backwards compatibility for a number of titles. So it is important, and it'll help you stay in the Xbox's ecosystem if you're there, and if you decide to come into it, if you're new to it, then you'll know, hey, if I play my games here, they're not going to disappear, or I'm not going to have to leave them behind when the next box comes out. So yeah, it definitely matters, and it's been good to see Microsoft hammer on that, because it's impossible for me to say, and it sounds like a console fanboy thing for me to say, but I have to genuinely wonder if without Microsoft pushing it so hard and putting it out there for gamers to use, it would have even bothered with PS4 compatibility on the PS5. I mean, Microsoft really has sort of dragged the console industry forward on this, which is great to see.
Yeah, for sure. And then Bo, I'm sure as a PC gamer, it all seems a little bit silly, even having to think about such things.
Yeah, I'll tell you where everything is backwards compatible. It's on PC. I can load up a game from 1992. It runs fine.
Yeah. But you don't get Last of Us Part 2, at least not yet. Ryan, it seems like everyone is aware that Xbox Series S is real and is coming, even though Microsoft has not officially announced it yet. When is that announcement coming?
Every time we talk about this, it's like, well, it's got to be soon, and we didn't get an August event. I mean, at this point, I don't even know if there's going to be an event for it. Here's a press release with some product photos and the specs of it and the price of it, and that's going to be it. Because it is a strange thing where how do they message it amongst the the core audience that you'd need to message to, because it does seem like a device that, and I say this not in a bad way, like this thing's not aimed at us. It's not aimed at the hardcore. We're Series X customers. If you're watching this, if you're a part of IGN as we are, or an IGN viewer or reader, like, yeah, the Series X is probably what you're going for. It's going to be the more mainstream casual gamers where the Series S might be the more appealing option of hey, I can jump into these newer generation games for a lot less money, and maybe you don't have a 4K TV, so maybe they don't even need the pomp and circumstance around Series S, and they'll just put it out. But I mean, I presume we've talked about this before, but I think whenever we get the price and release date for that, it'll be the exact same time that we get the price and the release date for the Series X as well. I think it's just going to all come out at once.
Yeah, you couldn't reveal your lower end, cheaper model of your next gen console without letting us know how much cheaper it is.
Exactly.
And the whole reason we're talking about this is because Xbox Series S branding continues to show up on Xbox product that people are buying legitimately now. So at this point, Ryan, like, there's no chance Xbox Series S isn't real, and that isn't the name, right?
It's super real, and that's the name. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, before we go, we've got results of last week's poll. We asked, are you ready to upgrade to a next-gen Nintendo Switch? Because new rumors surfaced about an upgraded Nintendo Switch that might be coming earlier next year. And 44.6% of you, the majority of respondents, said, yes, you are ready for more power to play current and next-gen games on the go. So most of you were ready for a new Switch. 31.6% said, no, I love my Switch just the way it is. 23.8% said, maybe just, for the right price. They're going to wait and see. Bo, we're talking about all this high-end graphics performance. On the complete other end of the spectrum is the Nintendo Switch. What's your sort of feeling? Is it with next-gen consoles launching, with these new graphics cards coming, is it time for Nintendo to upgrade the current model of the Switch?
I mean, I think so. I absolutely love my Switch. I keep saying I'm a PC guy, but the Switch is the other console that I play. I don't have a PS4 or an Xbox One. Don't tell anyone at IGN. But I have a Switch and I play it all the time. And to me, they're totally different things, where I'm on my PC for, FPS games and high-end graphics experiences, and then I love playing indie games and smaller, more personal games on the Switch. I like to sit on the couch in mobile mode and watch TV in the background. But that's the thing, though, is with the Switch is already, when it launched, it had some kind of outdated hardware. So there are newer, and especially Nvidia makes the chip that's inside the Switch, so there might be a cut down version that uses some of this new tech that maybe is capable of a lot more on a similarly very small little chip that could go into some kind of next gen Switch. And, maybe it ends up looking like something similar to the way that Apple treats its iPad family, where you don't really have, I guess they do have like iPad 2 or 3, but it just, you just have a newer model that comes out over a couple of years. But and then at a certain point, games just stop supporting the older versions. But with the newer ones, it just has a higher resolution, and then it can support the higher resolution.
That is very exciting to think about. We have a poll for you for next week to vote on. We want to know, does NVIDIA's new GPU tempt you to switch from console to PC? You think it's amazing? You want all the GPU power? You're going to stick with your current setup for now? Or are you just a console gamer? Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we will share the results with you next week. And that will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch 2020. Thank you very much to Ryan, Jonathan, and Bo. We will be back next Friday, same time, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.